I've taken to exploring some underrated video game soundtracks on this channel. Last year, I looked at music in the 2003 Hobbit video game. In March of this year, I looked at music in the indie game Sonority. And last month, I looked at music in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, an overlooked score for a Zelda game. This month, we're going to talk about music in one of the Her Interactive Nancy Drew games. I've been a fan of these games since playing them at a friend's house as a child. I discovered the digital versions as an adult and have since played through all of the games, except for the two most recent ones. In terms of point-and-click mystery games, I find the Nancy Drew franchise unmatched in the blend of puzzles, story, dialogue, and exploration. I have played several other games in the same genre: the Broken Sword series, Colpo Innata, the Siberia series, that's Siberia with a Y, and one of the Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot mysteries. And, although I've enjoyed these games to some extent, none have the same combination of elements that make the Nancy Drew games really special. Apart from the gameplay itself, the music in the Nancy Drew games is excellent, especially considering the size of the team and the frequency of releases in Her Interactive's golden years. Apart from the recurring menu music, each game has its own unique soundtrack that fits the vast array of settings Nancy finds herself in when solving mysteries. Fans seem to appreciate the music, as YouTube is littered with fan-made playlists featuring music from the games. However, I have yet to find anyone analyzing the music in the games. Although I would argue the quality of the music has stayed steady, the series has gone through a few different composers. Kevin Manthey composed the music for the first game, Secrets Can Kill, through Alibi and Ashes. I found no information on why he stopped composing for the series. After Manthey left, the Danish composer Thomas Regan took over, composing music for Tomb of the Lost Queen in 2012 through Sea of Darkness in 2015. Ryan Ricks wrote the music for Midnight in Salem, and I could not find the name of the composer for the latest release, Mystery of the Seven Keys. But back to Regan. According to an interview with Regan, linked in the description, he was approached by Her Interactive in 2010 to be the new composer for the series. I couldn't find much else about him in terms of biography. According to his IMDb page, he has mostly composed for lower-budget video games such as Nancy Drew. He does have a YouTube channel, though, so you can go show him some love for his contributions to the Nancy Drew franchise over there. Regan shares in the same interview that for each game, he was given screenshots of locations and instructions of the type of mood and feel the producer wanted for each game. He then started sketching music to fit that mood. For some games, the Her Interactive producers evidently wanted to lean into the exoticist elements of the locale, such as the Egyptian feel in Tomb of the Lost Queen and the Celtic feel in Haunting of Castle Malloy. However, for Silent Spy, the topic of today's video, this was not the case. Even though the game takes place in Scotland, the music leans more on the spy aspect of the game, and even more so on Nancy's feelings about her mother. Because of this, Silent Spy essentially has three types of music. You have the tropey spy-sounding type music. These are the tracks titled Purpose Theme, Spy Theme, and Stealth Theme. Here's a couple examples of what those sound like. The game also features ambient danger music. Here's an example of that kind of music. I think this exact music might be used in other Nancy Drew games. If not, there's definitely similar music for the same kind of situations in other games. And lastly, but most importantly, you have the piano-heavy, sad-sounding music, which includes Kate's song for Nancy and Carson. Regan shares how Kate's song came about in the interview I mentioned earlier. He talks about it from 1403 to 1635, if you want to listen to the conversation yourself. Regan was told to write a theme for Nancy's mom, and says he found this a difficult task of balancing all the emotions the theme needed to convey. He started by sketching a simple melody that he says took him about 30 to 40 seconds to write, and shared it with the producer over the phone. The producer loved it, but Regan did not think it was good enough, and wrote a more complicated and majestic theme instead. However, after hearing this new theme, both him and the producer decided the simpler one was better and more fitting for the game. Kate's song is an important plot point that is used in a late-game puzzle. It is heard throughout the various flashback cutscenes where we get to see young Nancy with her mother. Well, we don't really get to see her because we never get to see Nancy, but you know what I mean. There are two versions of this song on the soundtrack album, the Nancy version and the Kate version. They are essentially the same song with a couple exceptions. The Nancy version, for instance, has a very convoluted rhythm in the melody, whereas the Kate version is pretty straightforward rhythmically. Also, the melody line in the Kate version sounds an octave lower than the Nancy version, and there are additional harmonies in Carson's theme, the B section, in the Kate version. Let's give that a listen. Thank you to Emily Flood for a transcription of the Nancy version on MuseScore. I am using her transcription for my analysis, but have written out the simplified rhythms of the Kate version so it's a little easier to digest. Kate's song has 3 elements to it. In one of the flashbacks, Kate tells Nancy the first theme represents her, and the second theme represents her father. And also that Kate herself is somewhere in there, but that doesn't matter because all she can hear when she plays is Nancy and Carson. The song starts in E minor with the Nancy theme. The first Nancy phrase repeats twice with a slightly altered rhythm the second time. Both of these phrases end with finality on the note E. E, of course, being the tonic note for E minor. If we take a look at the left-hand notes, notice we have the notes E and B, but the third is missing to make this a proper chord. Adding a G natural here would give us an E minor chord, whereas adding a G sharp would give us an E major chord. This creates some ambiguity that I think adds to the forlorn, sad sound of the song. For instance, here is how those first 2 phrases would sound if they ended on a proper E minor chord. I guess it sounds kind of common to me with the third added. I certainly like it better without. After this opening phrase repeats twice, we move into a third phrase that keeps moving upwards, pauses on a high E, and then moves down to a G. The G fills in the third to give us a proper E minor chord. And this is how Nancy's theme ends. Let's give that a listen. The next phrase is the start of Carson's theme. Carson's theme fits well in G major. Like Nancy's theme, Carson's repeats the same phrase. The first time, this phrase lands on a B. the D and G in the accompaniment notes fill out a tonic G major chord. The second time, this phrase ends on an A that fills out a D chord. D is the dominant of G major, giving us a half cadence here. Although, like with Nancy's theme, the third of the chord is missing, so we don't have a sense of whether it's a major or minor chord. Here, we find another difference between Nancy's and Kate's versions of the song. The Nancy version will repeat Carson's phrase 2 more times, ending both of them on an E minor chord, which moves the song back into E minor. In the Kate version shown here, however, the music instead repeats the first phrase of Nancy's theme twice, and ends the song there. Let's give that a listen. Therefore, the Kate version gives us an A-B-A prime form, Nancy's theme, then Carson's, then a shortened version of Nancy's, and then the Nancy version gives us an A-B form, where we hear Nancy's theme, then Carson's, and that's it. The final element of the song is the accompaniment. Although she never states it as such, this could be the part of Kate that has made it into the song. It has the same rhythmic pattern throughout, with the lowest note on the downbeat followed by offbeats of a higher note. These offbeats create mostly perfect fifth intervals rather than full chords. Sometimes the melody line fills in the third of a chord, so we know if it is major or minor, but sometimes, as we have already seen with Nancy's theme and Carson's theme, the modal nature of the harmony is left ambiguous. So that's all the different parts of Kate's song. This theme on solo piano only shows up in the flashback scenes. However, the Traditions track that appears throughout gameplay uses part of the Nancy theme on bagpipes. It is simplified a bit rhythmically, but the notes are definitely there. Mixing in the bagpipe sound with Kate's song ties her to the location of her death and Nancy's search for answers there. Here's what that part of Traditions sounds like. From the interview with Regan, it sounds like he started composing the soundtrack with Kate's song. As such, there are a few other tracks that seem in some ways derivative of Kate's song. 3 other themes on the Silent Spy soundtrack fit into this sad piano category. They are called Forward, Expectations, and Memories. These themes are used fairly interchangeably throughout the game, although Forward seems the default used most often. For the most part, these themes relate to Kate's song in instrumentation, accompaniment, and key, not so much melody. Let's start with the Forward theme. Like Kate's song, this theme starts in E minor, but it stays there. Here's what it sounds like. may have noticed the accompaniment has a similar emphasis of offbeats, like Kate's song. Forward also has two distinct melodies. One moves at a faster pace and the other at a slower one, much like Nancy and Carson's themes. Furthermore, the first theme partially returns at the end, creating an ABA prime form like the Kate version of Kate's song. I didn't really notice any similarities in the melodic content itself. I can point out the FEF motion in Forward's A section that also happens in Nancy's theme of Kate's song, but that feels like a stretch and is probably a coincidence of both pieces being in E minor. Both B sections move slowly, but in Forward, the B section moves up, and in Carson's theme, it moves down. And the notes aren't reversed or anything like that, and there is more rhythmic interest in Forward's B section. So again, probably coincidental. Suffice to say, although there are similarities in structure, key, instrumentation, and accompaniment in these two songs, the melody in Forward seems original. Let's give Forward another listen, keeping all those things in mind. As far as piano-heavy pieces in this soundtrack go, we also have the Expectations theme. Let's give it a listen. The first similarity to Kate's song is that we are once again in E minor. This song also has two distinct sections to it, and the first section does not return, creating an A-B form like the Nancy version of Kate's song. We hear some emphasis on offbeats in the accompaniment, although since every eighth note is sounding, it's not quite like the accompaniment in Kate's song. The shifting meters do give an off-kilter kind of feel to it that can be likened to the offbeat emphasis in the accompaniment of Kate's song, but it's certainly not the same thing. Again, I didn't notice any melodic similarities between Expectations and Kate's song. However, the first measure does function as a sped-up version of the B section from Forward. Although, since both of these are just an ascending E minor scale with different rhythms, this could also easily be a coincidence. If you notice any more profound similarities, feel free to let me know in the comments. For now, let's give Expectations another listen. The final piano-heavy song in the score is Memories. This one relates the least to Kate's song, which seems strange based on the title, but it is what it is. Unlike Forward and Expectations, this piece is not in E minor. Without transcribing the full harmonies, it's hard to tell what the key is, but based on the key signature and the final cadence, G sharp minor is likely. Memories has two parts, but without the repetition of phrases we've seen in all the other piano songs. There is one long piano phrase that ends decisively on F sharp before trailing down to a C sharp. Let's give this first half a listen. The second part is a variation on the first melody, but in bagpipes, and what sounds like a tin whistle or some other kind of Celtic whistle. Note the similarity in movement in the opening of the bagpipe melody to this part of the piano melody. Also note the same downwards movement in the piano part here and the tin whistle here. The bagpipe melody trails off on a D sharp, and we can hear a very strong B sounding as the lowest note. These two notes, combined with the G sharp in the tin whistle and later piano, give us an ending on a first inversion G sharp minor chord. Let's listen to that. The accompaniment of Memories is also very different from Kate's song and the other pieces we've looked at, with rich sustained chords rather than constant movement. The only real connection I found between this song and Kate's is the use of piano. So that is some of the music in Silent Spy. Obviously, Kate's song is very important to the game, and it's nice that some of the gameplay music is connected to Kate's song with key center accompaniment and instrumentation. As such, I think this game is a great example of how interconnectivity of music does not only have to be through melodies, but that other aspects of a musical cue can be used to connect music in effective ways as well. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for future videos. If you like this type of video, be sure to check out my other music analyses in this playlist here. Thank you all so much for watching.